right, here we are. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another session or installation of Doc Talk. Today I'm very pleased to have Ron Holland joining us today to talk all things about boat and his career in the boating world. Just finished reading Ron Holland's book. Phenomenal, by the way, book that you wrote, Ron, All of the Oceans. I think the book could have had many titles, Audacious being another one. I was reading your book cover to cover, and there's so many life lessons in that book, and not only the storytelling you do, but it's something. I don't have children, but there's a lot of lessons here that if I had kids or nieces and nephews, I would instill a lot of the things that I think you learn the hard way or instinctively throughout your career. And I'm happy to have you here today to share your story with all the rest of us. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Jeff. And always fun to share the stories.
Yeah, it is actually. And it's funny, storytelling is a great way for us to remember and learn so much, right? There's a lot in stories in life. It sounds to me, starting back, and I was wondering about this, you seem to have a fascination with the sea and sailing from a very young age. You were reading books as a child about the sea. Tell me, how far back did you realize that you had that sort of passion for the ocean and sailing?
It was pretty early. Now, my parents, well, first of all, growing up in New Zealand, that was luck. That was luck. Because it's really rugby in the winter and sailing in the summer. So my parents weren't involved with sailing, but they knew about it because just growing up in New Zealand. And on my 7th birthday, I'd pleaded with my parents to get me a boat, and they got a little sailing boat, 7-foot sailing boat. And so I'm turning 7. And I remember standing in the middle of the kitchen crying my eyes out because they got a sailboat, not a rowboat. Because I knew sailboats tipped over, I guess. So now my mother's father was a fisherman, so that would be the only connection with boating other than growing up in Auckland. So it was a pretty early start. Now, I think another big influence was when I started going to school, when you're 5 or something, I was really having difficulty reading. My mother was very concerned. I went to all kinds of child psychologists and with luck, she found someone who became quite a famous teacher, the first woman on Auckland University's faculty, and he'd been in the States on a Fulbright scholarship. I don't know whether that makes, whether your listeners will be familiar with that, but I guess it's an American sponsored system that overseas teachers can come to the States and learn a specialty. So this lady, Mary Clay, had just got back to New Zealand when my mother tracked her down for help my kid learn to read at a pretty late age, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something. And so that was an influence also, because the way she figured out to teach me to read has a boat nautical theme to it. Her husband was in the Royal New Zealand Navy. And I remember my first interview with her is, sort of a kid, a bit of a dummy, had to go and get special reading lessons. And I remember her being totally confident that I was going to be able to read. And I was thinking, God, she's a very ambitious lady, Everyone knows I can't read. And the way she got me to read was she said, "I know just the book to start you reading with." She went out of the room, came back with one of her husband's Royal New Zealand Navy nautical kind of almanac type thing. So it's a thing like, 6 inches thick, giant book. Well, I couldn't read the first primer. How the hell am I going to read this? Well, I opened the page and there was a story about anchors. I'm right into it. So then I became a bookworm. So those are getting the boat when I was 7 and having her teach me to read were big influences.
Yeah.
And I think just New Zealand was the biggest boat connection influence.
And it sounds like also, both your parents were really supportive. I remember when the first time you were sailing, your mother was on the beach and she said, always come home, be safe. Even though you were taking big risks, she didn't stop you. She just wanted you to be, sounds like, considerate, to not take crazy chances, but she was willing to have you take certainly gambles at a very young age. And she was supporting you with that, it looks like.
Yeah, that's true. I don't ever remember fighting with my parents about when I wanted to do something and they were against it. I don't ever remember that happening. It was more like I figured they'd never say no, so I just accepted every opportunity that came up. Now, a particularly special incident was when I was 15. I had the opportunity to be invited on a 36-foot ketch to sail from New Zealand to Australia. And I was pretty excited about the invitation. And I remember going home and telling my parents at the dining table, I've been invited to go on this yacht to Sydney. And there was just no question. They didn't put up any red flags, I didn't know these people. Just met the guy that owned it. So I was given a lot of freedom, but I think that was mostly another New Zealand influence. I think this is what I didn't feel I was unique in any way. Just same as all the other kids my age.
Yeah, it seems like, and that also the way that your dad was volunteering for the Torbay. I'm not sure. I've never heard of how it's pronounced. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right, Torbay. Yeah, Torbay.
Yeah, that's also huge to be, part of it at a young, to give you that sort of environment. Is that where you got the love for competition?
Yes.
And
it turned out that sailing club produced some gold medalists later on.
Really?
So there was a very keen and talented group of guys in that club. So again, just luck. I grew up in Torbay. We were on the beach every day after school.
The one thing about your book, which I think is interesting, is you certainly seem to be competitive on the race. You seem to be competitive to get the designs to win. But at the same time, the way I was reading your book, you give a lot of reverency to other designers or competitors. It seems like you look up to a lot of people, like you constantly praise others or respect others in your field, and yet are willing to compete. It seems like almost like a very gentleman sort of arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about this subject, Jeff, and the way I look back at it, because I was so hopeless at school, I had no trouble asking for help. I was asking for help all the time. So this is one of the biggest, freedom is a word I would use, that I had, because I had absolutely no worry about asking for help. What I see is that kids that are quite bright and do well at school hate asking for help. They figure they should be able to figure it out themselves. So when you mention giving credit, it was a bit like the help thing. I had no trouble acknowledging my team or getting help, and so that was lucky. That was a lucky thing too. But there's a lesson there too.
Yeah, it is. And it sounds like you were able to be surrounded, probably because you gave credit or were willing to be, you were surrounded with a lot of influential people that came in your life and stayed. You know, like it wasn't transactional. People would come back and back and back. So it wasn't just the promise. It sounds like the journey was also rewarding for everyone, because not only were you guys meeting crazy timelines, it was insane on the production, but it sounds like everyone was keep coming back to what you were doing as a group, meaning evolving racing sailboats, always constantly pushing the envelope. Is that something that was that drive for innovation? Was that a drive for innovation's sake, or was that something more that you did for just because you wanted to win the races or have your design win the races?
I think that it was influenced by me being hopeless at school. I mean, I was really a bad student when I started school, for 5 to 15. And lucky, I learned early on to ask for help, as we talked about. And then the other thing was I actually went and searched out connections to get help. Like I remember knocking on the door of the amateur New Zealand yacht designers that were successful at the time. So I consciously went out searching. I think it's because I was hopeless at school. But I wasn't not interested in learning stuff, so I had to do it my own way.
Yeah, I think that's really an inspiring lesson of the book, because a lot of people nowadays think, oh, I don't have a degree in this, or I'm not formally educated in that, therefore I can't do it. That never stopped you, clearly. You took the whole thing, you self-educated yourself in the field, clearly. I want to talk about Improbable as a start, and you dreaming big on those journeys. How did that seems to have been a big breakaway boat for your team and yourself. Is that one of your significant, is that a milestone in terms of?
That's definitely a milestone.
Yeah.
And so I'm invited, a San Francisco yacht owner, George Cascadden, commissions a New Zealand designer builder to build a big racing schooner called New World. And I know Spencer. I'm sweeping up shavings in his shed during the building of this big schooner. The boat was so radical that the John Spencer designer builder and George Cascadden decided to build a sailing model. So they built a 24-foot model of this 70-foot schooner. I'd been hopeless at school. I'm winning yacht races on the weekend at the Torbay Boating Club. So I never had a self-esteem problem. I was, on the weekend I'm a hero. Okay, I'm a dunce and I got the record for the most canes on the hand and behind. But so it worked out okay. The reason I got involved with this George Cascadden project, which was a huge influence on the rest of my life, was because of my success dinghy racing. And when Spencer was launching this 24-foot model, he had a visit from Cascadden from San Francisco, and he wanted the boat to perform well, so he invited me to sail it. So I arrived to show off this model of the big schooner with George Cascadden. So after we were out sailing for a couple of hours, Cascadden invited me to go on the cargo ship with the 24-foot schooner and live with him and his family in Desidero Street in San Francisco. So that was a huge, lucky opportunity. But what I reflecting, I just said, yes, I'm going. I didn't ask permission to go. I went home and told my parents this is what I'm doing. They didn't say no. So that was another example of not feeling constrained by my parents or by the sort of social norms, if you like. I was 15 and I was going to cross the Tasman Sea to Sydney. Now, so the model sailing story was a few months after that. So I'm pretty proficient sailing, dinghies and across the ocean. And Kiskadden invited me to join his family. And he had another very famous boat called Spirit. And Spirit was a 34-foot Throckmorton Stevens. We're going to get to Improbable eventually. Stay with me.
I'm all here.
So I'm in San Francisco, living with the Cascadens, just up from the yacht club in the marina, Divisoria Street. Now, when the cargo ship arrived in California from New Zealand, it had been diverted from San Francisco to San Pedro. And here's another lucky break. So Cascadden hired Commodore Tompkins to take his soling trailer down to San Pedro and pick up the 24-foot schooner. So I was lucky to have it all day in the car with Commodore driving up from San Pedro to San Francisco. And I was invited to do an Acapulco race with Commodore and his crew. Hey, now Tompkins and Skip Allen had just won the Fastnet race and with Dick Carter on Red Rooster. So this is I'm in the top echelon of world ocean racing sailing. Oh, I guess they'd have booted me off if I was no good, but so I hung in with them. So, but what I tell students is be aware of the opportunities, because the opportunities that are so easy to miss. They're actually, we're taught to miss them. We're taught to miss them by our parents who want safety in a certain direction. They imagine us as lawyers or doctors. So our parents are to blame for us missing opportunities. The priests are to blame. The radio, TV is to blame. You know what I mean? We are taught to not grab the opportunities. Now, I don't know why I was different, but I just said yes to every opportunity. I did that all through my career, right up to designing Mirabella 5, which is, a giant, impossible project. I just say, yeah, then you figure it out later. So now I come back to Improbable. So I'm on Commodore Tompkins' kind of permanent crew with Skip Allen, Dave Wally, Tom Wiley, but really world-class sailors. And they, after winning the Fastnet race, Tompkins is dreaming about putting together his own kind of project. And the focus was the Jamaica race, which this team had won the year before. And through Commodore and his dream of this Improbable project, I met Gary Mull, who gave me a job in his studio above Oakland in Claremont. So I'm getting I'm an amateur yacht designer. I've got 2 or 3 boats afloat in New Zealand. I'm 21 years of age when I arrived to California. So I'm working for Mull. At the time, Commodore Tompkins was discussing with Mull his dream Improbable project for the Jamaica race. So that was my connection with that. I worked with Gary on that, and I actually was influential in as much as I promoted building it in New Zealand, much less expensive than in California, and I suggested they build it where I did my boat building apprenticeship. So I was quite connected with the whole design build process. And because the boat came to Florida and won the Jamaica race. So, and I'm still on the Commodore Tompkins crew list. So the Improbable was unconventional. It was a boat not designed to the rule. And the rule was in transition because prior to this period, racing yachts in the States were designed to the CCA rule. Boats in Europe and New Zealand were designed to the RRC rule, and there were some fundamental differences. At this time, the two rules merged to create the International Ocean Racing Rule. But anyway, Commodore and Mull envisaged a boat that was not so rule-oriented as just a damn fast downwind California type yacht. But it was particularly educational period because we were dealing with analyzing the two rules to create Improbable, and it gave me a very big lesson in yacht design. So that was a big influence. And of course, Dave Allen and Tim Rodney, who owned Improbable, then went on to do Imp.
Yeah, that's the next one on my. I mean, there's so many in your book. You only, highlight all your designs. You give certain attention to some of them, but not all of them. There's just too much. It sounds to me that your willingness to take opportunities for yourself also extended with your design. It almost seems like it's one and the same. It's a willingness to take chances with your own life in terms of when you went to Ireland, all of these different steps. But then you were probably, it looks to me reading your book, you were also doing that at a technical level with the designs, always pushing the envelope, seeing. So it's almost reading the book, you're like, it's almost part of your ethos. It's like the willingness to try new things, not just yourself, but also the boats and then the materials and all the, I guess, how the industry is pushing the boundaries of construction. Like the mast was a big thing you were talking about, the rudders being carbon, all the lessons that you learned through that process. It seems like a lot of pushing of boundaries constantly.
And I think that's a huge New Zealand influence. So when I was growing up in New Zealand, if you wanted a boat, you actually built it yourself. There's guys building boats in their back garden all over New Zealand. So there is, if you were growing up in the States, you went to Macy's to get something. In New Zealand, you just built the thing yourself. So there was that kind of pioneer. Well, actually, when you think about it, America should be a pioneering influence. Anyway, I was saying that was the pioneering New Zealand influence on. If you wanted something, you just figured out how to do it, build it yourself properly.
And that quarter tonner competition, that's also interesting. The way that you guys would show up at the race, not knowing who the competition would be, or even what the designs would look like. I mean, that's like competing in a vacuum. You're competing against what you think your limitations are, and then you show up on race day, and you have all this innovation happening from. It sounded like from so many different places. Yeah. That sounded like a great environment to be in.
An important influence in commenting on that, Jeff, is we were designing to the rule, so it's not pure yacht design. It's yacht design to trick the handicap. So there was a kind of academic aspect as well as an art and beauty of boat design aspect. I'm thinking after doing a few years of sailing Improbable around the world, and I'm thinking I really should not give up on this yacht design idea. A very important story on this one, which I think I wrote in the book about, but you got to hear this.
Tell me.
So George Cascadden told me, okay, we'll take this little schooner sailing, but the main reason I got you here is to help me get Spirit ready for the LA Tahiti race. Great, it's right up my street. So I'm in Sausalito with fixing Spirit up to go in this race, and the Transpac introduced some new rules, which George Cascadden felt was a personal attack on his yachting style. First new rule, you got to have an engine.
Oh yeah, I remember that story.
Spirit sailed across the Honolulu race, Fastnet race, across the Atlantic with no engine. Putting an engine in Spirit was a total sacrilege. So that's my job, put an engine in Spirit. Oh, God. Okay, we put a lawnmower engine in, and then we didn't need exhaust and through-hole fittings. But there was a minimum speed requirement that we just passed. So that restriction on Spirit doing the Tahiti race, we got it. But if taking Cascadden's, they were against me type thing, the yacht club, they offered another rule: minimum crew 6. Well, they did the Spirit all these races with 5. So now he's got to take another person on the boat to Tahiti. He was pretty convinced. They're just picking on me. So Cascadden came up with a classic. We're going to take Johnny, our nine-year-old kid, with us as the 6th crew member.
Just for weight, just to meet the minimum.
And poor Johnny, years later, I asked him, "Do you remember what?" But he said, "I can't remember a bloody thing about it. I just blacked it out. It was the most boring 23 days a 9-year-old kid could spend." So anyway, there was a reason I went back to talk about Spirit, which I can't remember why. But because Doug Peterson was one of our crew. So Cascadden had often invited Doug Peterson to sail on Spirit, and he was one of the crew for the Tahiti race. Well, obviously, well, not obviously, Doug was a student of yacht design. He's a couple of years older than me, so he'd be
Doug Peterson.
Yeah, Doug, 23. Yeah. He was 23 and I was 21. So you put us two on Spirit for 23 days. You think we're going to talk about yacht design? No kidding. So perfect, yeah. So after the Spirit Tahiti race experience, and actually before the improbable experience, which happened a couple of years later, I was thinking, if you're going to be a yacht designer, this is my discussion with Doug on Spirit, you got to design and build yourself a boat and show the boat can win races. Well, we both did that. I did the quarter tonner because it was the smallest, cheapest boat that I thought would gain some international recognition if it was successful.
That was a crazy production. I read in the book, it's unbelievable. The timeline, your budget, building it with friends and family, investing your own money to do it.
Jeff, one thing, when I'm talking about this in public, I quite often I introduce Elon Musk now. Now, and I say, don't let the facts spoil a good story. So I don't know how accurate my Elon Musk story is, but who cares? You get the idea. So when I did my boat, I'd saved $6,000. and I'm working at this time in Florida at the Morgan Yacht Corporation. And the way I was going to do this, build this boat, was put every penny of my savings on this little boat.
All in.
Like Elon Musk did after he sold PayPal.
Yeah, you're talking about Tesla? What he did with Tesla?
You know, Facilities had to help him out. He wasn't going to make it. But it's a bit like no fear. See, I never contemplated what would happen if we didn't win and I wasn't going to be a yacht designer. I never kind of worried about it. I never thought it might not happen. So I do my kind of Elon Musk thing, put my 6,000, not 200 million, 6,000.
Yeah, but back then, though, I mean, that's a lot of money, though, honestly.
Yeah. So anyway, it worked out great. Won the chance to go to England for the Quarter Ton Cup. And similarly, Doug did a 1 tonner at the same time, and it won the chance to go to Sardinia for the 1 tonner cup. So coincidentally, being on Spirit talking boats for 23 days panned out successfully for both
of you. Yeah. It's interesting. That story was real. And I thought what was interesting is that when you're racing, it seems almost collegial, the competition between various people. It doesn't seem to be, certainly the book didn't seem to have any sort of negative animosity towards one another. It's almost like each one of you are pushing the envelope and then everyone's raising the bar. It's constantly a little bit like what Elon, and it's funny you brought that up because I was thinking rapid design and the willingness to fail. And I was thinking about what was happening with the carbon, the rudders. This willingness to take chances is almost instrumental to lead to future greatness. Otherwise, if you're too cautious, you know, it's going to take forever to get to where you could be unless you're willing to take chances.
I mean, that's an interesting angle you raised, which I wouldn't have gone there in my own thought process, but I think it's valid what you're saying, analyzing, looking out into this. Yeah. But what's conscious to me now is how either failing wasn't a big deal. I don't remember worrying about it. I had no idea whether the shape I was doing with my new quarter tonner was going to be better or not. I just it was more intuitive and artistic than it was arithmetic. Because remember, I'd failed arithmetic big time.
Yeah. And full circle, that's exactly what happened, I think, when you were doing the larger yacht. Was it Mirabella? I can't remember the one where you had all these different design. And it, like you were saying in the book, your first initial design that was chosen by the family.
That was a story about
was that
Bill Joy's Ethereal.
Oh yeah, and how the first version was after doing all the discovery, all the analysis, all the modeling. In the end, your intuition of the first design actually was that. Actually gives me chills, and that's being in the flow to be able to nail it, and then get the confirmation bias that it actually was the first one was the right one. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
And the way to explain this, Jeff, is, you know, you can't design the perfect boat because the wind speed changes and you're wrong. So you've got to design to encompass a wide range of different conditions. So you can never hit the perfect design because it's going to be hopeless when the wind changes. So, and that came now. That would be done by multiple analysis of computer studies. That wasn't a possibility when I did Ethereal. It was still pretty intuitive.
And that was crazy engineering challenges. It sounds to me that at one point, not only were you challenged for the racing, which obviously mattered a lot, and speed on the water and meeting, but also then at one point it became an engineering challenge, was the build, understanding the requirements, and then meeting those requirements seemed to be another layer on top of what you were doing with the sailboats. It's almost like a layer on a layer, because then the materials became a challenge, the construction, the build, the quality of the build. So it's almost like layers upon layers of complexity as the racing world was pushing that envelope forward. That seemed like the complexity seemed to be crazy at that point. Crazy.
And that was influenced quite a lot by the transition from wood and metal boat building to composites.
Mm.
So at this period in my career, and most importantly influenced by IMP, the San Francisco boat, where we were building lightweight fiberglass boats that were not very stiff. They would kind of move around a bit under the racing loads. And a Swedish friend of mine, who is a kind of engineer and an inventor, proposed putting a tubular space frame inside these flexible fiberglass boats, so we could make the hull a bit lighter and prevent the flexibility by putting in a structure that you could calculate how much you needed to prevent the bending. Buckmaster Fuller was doing this in his architectural stuff years before I was playing with this. So yeah, certainly I would follow, for instance, Formula One race car stuff. And I remember having the chance with Lotus, Colin Chapman, to be in the Monaco pit area during the Monaco Grand Prix, because Formula One cars were starting to use composites. And so there was a huge learning there. They had the money to budget. Yacht design, we had no R&D money. So we had to kind of watch what the other guys were doing, aerospace, automotive. So yeah, I was trying to make the boats lighter and stiffer. So I needed to follow these technologies. Because we knew from dinghy racing boats, stiffness and lightweight was, when you have one designs, if you can make a one design lighter and stiffer, it's going to be faster than the other guy. So I was taking that lesson into my ocean racing design world. It worked pretty good.